My name's Andrea and this video is a little bit different. Today I'm going to be talking about all the movies that I saw at Sundance. If you haven't seen my other videos where I talk about this, I went to Sundance this year virtually and I was able to watch a ton of movies, and I wanted to share some of the films that I saw because they're films that are probably going to be in circulation and on streaming services in the upcoming year and the years to come. And they're things that you should add to your to-be watch list, I think. I hope you guys enjoy, and please let me know if any of them interest you. Okay, the first film that I saw during festival run is a movie called Monarchs. This is directed by Alexis Gambis, and it stars Tenoch Huerta. This film is about a Mexican scientist who lives in New York, and he researches butterflies, monarch butterflies specifically, and why they are the color they are. And he travels back to his town because of things that happen, but it really explores kind of the complexities that come with science, and I really appreciate this film because you don't really see a lot of Mexican immigrant stories specifically set in STEM, and I think that's really interesting to see on screen. I talked with the director Alexis, and he said that he really wanted to bring humanity into science and show more of these kinds of stories. So yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I don't know when it will be out to watch publicly, but it's good. The next movie I saw was Rita Moreno, Just a Girl Who Decided to Go For It. This is a documentary. Again, I also spoke with the director and the producer for this film, and they are just people that are really, really passionate about bringing Rita's story to life. It was super interesting to learn a little bit more about Rita Moreno. She's such a pioneering influence in Hollywood and in Latinx Hollywood as well, so it was really kind of interesting to learn more about her. And what was really cool about this documentary was the use of paper doll illustrations. And as I was talking with the filmmakers, they explained that they wanted to use paper dolls because not only did Rita play with paper dolls when she was a little girl, but they wanted to use it as kind of symbolism for how Rita was treated. She was kind of like this doll that was kind of that people would put clothes on and kind of make up to be perfect, but at the end of the day she is like aging and quite frail, so that was a really interesting addition. Next film I saw was called CODA. CODA was a giant crowd pleaser during Sundance. It was bought by Apple TV in like this mega acquisition. So I'm pretty sure you will see it soon on your screens. So CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and it follows this girl who is the only person that hears and speaks in her family. Her mom, her dad, and her older brother are all deaf. And it's kind of a coming of age following her and her dreams. She wants to be a singer, she wants to go to school for singing, and it's kind of about that journey. What was really cool about CODA was that the deaf actors were actually deaf actors, and I really appreciated how integrated sign language was into the film as well. I think when we're talking about accessibility and that kind of stuff, it's definite, proof that these stories aren't that difficult to portray on screen, because I feel like executives or cynical people, they might say, oh, we don't have these type of stories because they won't appeal to the mainstream, but this film was such an audience favorite. It won most of the awards at Sundance, and for me as a viewer, I think it's going to be a definite film to watch out for upcoming award seasons. I'm sure it will win many awards. Again, the acting was so great on everybody's part, and I really liked it. It's a very cute story. It also has Eugenio Derbez as this Mr. Shu type character if you watch Glee, which is slightly strange because in my mind I associate him with like my childhood, so that was fun. The next movie I saw was Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised. This is a documentary, and it was directed by Questlove. This also won some awards at the festival, and it featured never before seen footage of the Harlem Cultural Festival, which celebrated African American music, culture, and promoted Black pride and unity. And 300,000 people attended this festival during the same summer as Woodstock, yet almost nobody knows about it. So it was really Again, to use the word interesting, it was really interesting to kind of see this footage and just learn more about this thing that I never knew existed before. The synopsis says that the footage from the festival sat in a basement unseen for 50 years until Questlove kind of placed it all together. So that's a definite other film to watch. It features people like Nina Simone and Stevie Wonder and B.B. King and Mavis Staples. They're all in this video and they're all in their prime and they're singing amazing, and just the film feels so alive and it just vibrates with this energy that is so contagious, and it's just such a fun film to watch. I'm gonna skip the shorts just because I watched a lot of shorts, so if you're interested in shorts, let me know. The next feature that I saw was called Pink Cloud. This film is Brazilian and it follows a pandemic, and this was filmed pre-COVID and conceived pre-COVID, so it was pretty much a coincidence that it followed a very eerily similar vibe and situation, and I think inherently because of that, all the films that I watched, I kind of interpreted through the lens of the pandemic and through the lens of like grief and just like staying at home and just this prolonged uncertainty. And so that's kind of, I think that really shaped my perception of each film regardless. So anyway, so with the Pink Cloud, that kind of just multiplied and was emphasized in my viewing experience. It follows this couple who hook up on a one-night stand, and then the next morning, overnight, unexpectedly, this giant pink poisonous cloud just overtakes the city that they're in, and they can't leave their home unless they want to like die. So they're stuck in an indefinite, circumstance. So they kind of have to wait for the pink cloud to leave. So these two people are kind of forced together because of this circumstance. And years pass. And they're still stuck together. They kind of have to fast forward the relationship they didn't necessarily want, but they kind of had to create just because of the situation. And it really explores loneliness, I think, and the small silences that come with being trapped within your own, I guess, self. And yeah, I thought it was a very, very well done film, except for me, just as a viewer, I'm so curious to see how I would have felt about this film if COVID had not happened, Next documentary that I saw was called Playing with Sharks, and it follows this world famous diver called Valerie Taylor. Valerie Taylor started her career as a shark spearer, I believe it's called. She used to hunt sharks. She only ever killed one, I think it's in the documentary, but she kind of became this marine maverick as she turned into a diver, and she really advocated for conservation. She was also the consultant for Jaws, and she filmed the real sharks for Jaws, and she got like super close. If you see the footage in the film, it's just so outstanding how close she gets to these animals and how comfortable she is with these animals. And she still dives to this day. She's in her 80s, I believe, and her husband invented the chain mail suit and used herself as shark bait to get close to these animals. And her footage is just invaluable within the scientific and just like film footage community at large, just because of the proximity she was able to get with these animals. It's a very, 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 very well produced and well made film, and I enjoyed it a lot. The next movie I saw was called Knocking. Knocking has a lot of strong acting. For me as a viewer, I thought the pacing was a little slow at times, but I'm sure to others it was perfect. Knocking follows this woman who moves into a new apartment, and she hears like a knocking sound through the walls, and it won't stop and sense it, and it kind of really annoys her. It's just there all the time. She talks with her neighbors and her landlords about the knocking, and they all kind of brush her off. It's a movie about gaslighting a lot, and this event kind of gets to her so much that it leaves her very mentally unwell. This giant heat wave happens, and these events kind of collide together, and again it just intensifies until you reach like this really crucial boiling point. And as a viewer, I think it leaves it up to you to interpret what actually went wrong, but it's definitely a movie about gaslighting. It is Swedish, I believe, and it is directed by Rita. The next movie that I watched is a film called Mass. First off, this movie deals with a subject matter that is very sensitive, but the acting is completely strong in it. It is probably the strongest bit of acting that I saw during Sundance. Sundance's roster of films, yeah. It's directed by Fran Kranz, and it takes place years after this very tragic school shooting, and the parents of both the victim and the shooter kind of meet face to face in a room, and they just talk things out. The room is the only setting we see throughout the entire film, so it's basically 2 hours long, I believe, and everything takes place within this one room. And for me as a viewer, I never felt bored of it, and I was really kind of enthralled and intrigued to see what happened next, which I think is a testament to the actual writing itself, because I feel like if the writing itself wasn't strong, I would be bored and probably click another movie. But definitely this one kept me so intrigued. The actors are all powerhouse actors. It's Jason Isaacs, Anne Dowd, Martha Plimpton, and Reed Birney. And those are the only characters we see basically throughout the entire film. I think, again, it's a very sensitive subject matter. I'd be extremely interested to see what people that have kind of lived through the type of experience think of this film. But I thought that it was dealt very delicately because it felt genuine. I feel like oftentimes things feel exploitative when you can feel the actual filmmaker behind the camera maneuvering things or kind of frame things in a way to get these reactions out of the public, and I don't think that film did that. For me as a viewer, had this very, very genuine sense of empathy, which I think was important and created the distinction between, something that is moving versus something that could be seen as exploitative and really just nasty. The next film I saw is called The Sparks Brothers. It's directed by Edgar Wright. It is a documentary following Sparks the band. I did not really know anything about Sparks, to be honest. I probably could have recognized a song or two, but I have never followed them through careers or anything like that. I didn't even know their names prior to this documentary, so it was a great introduction for me as a viewer. This film is also going to be premiering at South by Southwest, by the way, if anybody's going to South by Southwest. And it's kind of about how this one rock band has been so influential and has kind of lasted for so long, yet has still been somewhat of an underdog throughout their entire career. It has a bunch of celebrity cameos. Like not Edgar Wright, he's a director. Well, he was in it, but anyways, Mike Myers is in this, like Weird Al, just a bunch of people. There's a lot of jams. I definitely went ahead and added a few Sparks songs into my Spotify after this one. Next movie I watched was a feature, and it's called Coming Home in the Dark. It is a film from New Zealand. It is directed by James Ashcroft, and it's such a well-paced film. It's about a school teacher who's forced to confront a brutal act from his past when a pair of ruthless drifters take him and his family on a nightmare road trip. When I first screened this film, I was actually kind of scared because they came with really heavy trigger warnings for violence, and so I was very, very somewhat hesitant to go into the film. And the reason why I had that heavy trigger warning was because literally within the first 20 minutes of the film, there are some deaths that will definitely leave people uneasy if your parents or if you have siblings or anything like that. But I think it sets the tone in what the film is trying to achieve. So basically, I was watching the Q&A with the filmmaker, and he wanted to address kind of the sins of New Zealand, the sins of the country, through this very hyper-focused kind of thriller film, and I think he definitely does that. there were some points where the film felt a little bit rocky, where if I felt as a viewer, it didn't know what way it wanted to go. Like if it wanted to go straight generic like thriller, murder mystery, or if it wanted to go somewhere a little bit different. And I wish it was a little bit longer at times, solely to expand on some really interesting characters that I think didn't get enough airtime. But yeah, definitely it was definitely dark in the sense that the bad guys in this movie are bad. They're really bad. But we get explanations why, which was interesting. The next movie that I watched for Sundance is a film called In the Earth. It's directed by the guy who directed the Netflix Rebecca, Ben Wheatley. It's another pandemic movie. But this one I did not enjoy. I'm gonna be real with y'all. I just did not like this movie. It did not vibe with me. Except for maybe the last 20 minutes, and that's mostly because the visuals were really cool and they reminded me of Annihilation. And honestly, I would just rather watch Annihilation than rewatch this film. Anyway, this is about a deadly virus that kind of destroys the entire world, and this doctor has to go on this mission through this forest to get to another like doctor and like give him something. And him and another girl, they start on their little forest trip, and kind of they're met with this person who lives in the woods and says that he can help them, and then it turns into a very kind of early 2000s-esque wrong turn kind of movie, and this dude kind of tortures them, blah blah blah, but then it kind of shifts genres again because this guy believes that in like this forest witch, he like carves runes into their body and that kind of stuff. So I think my problem with this film was how abrupt the twists and turns of it seem to be in terms of genre. Like we start with this very straight like dystopian horror, and then we get into kind of this completely different like paranormal thing, and then it goes somewhere else, and then we end at Annihilation, and there's like a lot of things going on. I don't know. This movie got bought by Neon. It's acquired by Neon, so I'm sure it'll be online in the future. I didn't really like it, but I think the ending was dope. It was a really good ending. I love the last line it ended on. I think it was so good. I just wish that the themes and kind of the vibe that was in the last 20 minutes of the movie was the entire movie. The next movie that I saw was Prisoners of the Ghostland. And this is Sion Sono's first English movie, so I was very excited. If you're not familiar with Sion Sono, he is a filmmaker that is kind of known for his very eccentric films. I'll leave it at that. They're very out of the world. And so in Prisoners of Ghostland, it stars Nicolas Cage, and it is based in this town called Samurai City, where this ruthless bank robber is sprung from jail by a wealthy warlord called the Governor, whose adopted granddaughter Bernice goes missing. This bank robber is kind of recruited to look for her, and that's Nicolas Cage character. This is definitely a book that, not a book, whoa. This is definitely a film that is about time and what time means and the passing of time, which I found very interesting just to watch. So there's definite callbacks to like Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and just time, like time frozen, time lost, and time still to be seen in the future. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, it's a very long movie. There's a lot of moving parts to it, so I can definitely see where people might be thrown off from it, just because, again, it's such an elaborate plot, and it gets kind of more zany as it progresses. So yeah. The next film I saw is called Pleasure, got bought by A24, which is very, very interesting to me in the sense that this film, literally within the first 10 minutes, we see genitals. And I'm not talking about the shade of a genital or like the silhouette, no, full on genitals. So it follows 20-year-old Bella Sherry as she leaves her small town life in Sweden for LA with the aim to become the next big porn star. But it turns out the road to her goal is much more harder and difficult than she imagined. And so we're kind of taken along the journey with this girl, and you really start to feel with her and you want her to succeed in her dreams. And as a viewer, I think that it's a film that doesn't care about what the audience might think of it. It's just a film that wants to present its own truth, and I think that it does that successfully. We see Bella go through castings, we see her go through bad acting experiences with like porn co-stars. We see her make friends, lose friends, and make really hard, difficult decisions that aren't exactly moral, but we understand why she makes them. And yeah, there's just a lot of genitals in this movie. I'm very interested to see how A24 is going to market this film. I'm guessing there's going to be like a director's cut and like a censored version. Yeah,